Well, again, it's fantastic to be here with this group. As I was introduced, my name is Scott Gerbert, and I'm going to jump in on some slides and some resources, a couple of things that I'll share right up front. We have a small group. It's an intimate group right now. So if you need to ask questions as we go, please do drop them in the chat. Unmute yourself if you're comfortable doing that and saying, Scott, can you pause for a second? You're not going to disrupt my flow or change how I'm presenting or what I'm presenting. So feel free to ask questions as we go. Again, if you're holding a question for 20 minutes, then you're not processing necessarily what the new information is. You're still waiting to get that question answered from 20 minutes ago. So ask as we go. The other thing is I'll drop a number of things into the chat as we're going. And I know the team's going to email those out, potentially with the recording afterwards, but I'll drop some things into the chat as we go. I'm also going to focus in on one of our resources. I'm going to show you all of them, but as an example to walk you through how you'd access the materials and connect with those resources, I'm going to walk you through one in a little more detail than all of them, and you'll understand more as we go. But first things first, I'm going to jump into my slide deck. The slide that was shown before is my least favorite slide because it just has my big fat head on the screen. So I'm going to get through it really quickly, but I am the Director for Outreach and Strategic Partnerships, and I will drop into the chat a couple of things. I'll drop in there a link to both my email and to my calendar directly. A lot of times I'll do a presentation or have a conversation like this that's a one-time thing, and the people launch and they move on with whatever their next role responsibility is. Sometimes this is the beginning of a conversation. So you'll hear something I say and you'll be like, Scott, I want to implement this in my school or in my community. Can I schedule 15 minutes on your calendar or 30 minutes on your calendar to go a little deeper or to share this with my principal or my Drug-Free Communities Coalition or whatever it is. So feel free to grab my email and my calendar out of there. So the next thing is a little more detail about me. This is probably my favorite slide. So this is a picture of me with my grandfather. This is 1968. For those of you who are math people, you know how old I am. For those of you who are not math people, don't do the math. It's really not that important. But this photo is from 1968, and I share this for a couple of different reasons. One, that's a little me with a cigar in my mouth. It's the first nicotine I think that I consumed as a human being. But I share this because my grandfather was an amazing father, husband, grandfather, uncle, really successful business person, immigrated to the United States as a young person, was incredibly philanthropic, gave of his time and of his money to his community. So he was very much an amazing person that I aspired to be, other than the nicotine and alcohol addiction, which runs very deep in my family. And so I think one of the things I'm sharing up front is when we're working with young people or families, the idea of really decreasing scare tactics, blame, and shame language are, one, at the core of the work I'm hoping that you're all doing, but two, when you're using any of the Stanford Reach Lab resources that I'm going to talk about, there's no scare tactics, blame, or shame language in any of that. So a young person shouldn't leave a check-in with you or a prevention curriculum and go home and say, they said that grandma's a bad person because she smokes or vapes, or that my parents or my auntie or I am a bad person because I smoke or vape. So just know that that's at the core. And as Regan mentioned, I was an elementary and an alternative high school teacher in my teaching career. I was then a student services coordinator in a school district for 21 years. And then I was at a county office of education for 7 years after that, before joining the team at Stanford's Reach Lab. A lot of work that I've done over the years with Drug-Free Communities grantees, because I've been one, community coalitions, public health, behavioral health, and how those things all work and overlap. And as our budgets seem to be getting tighter and leaner, and a lot of us are looking at sort of blended funding streams where we might have a little nicotine money, might have a little bit of cannabis money, we might have opioid settlement funds or other things. It's important to recognize that there are some overlaps in substance use as far as how our funding streams and maybe the work that we're doing, how those blend together. So I share that. And then I'll jump in and share some additional resources. But that's my favorite photo in my whole slide deck. My second favorite slide is this one. Anytime that I'm talking with adults, not students, but adults, I will talk about the fact that nicotine and vaping and cannabis use is dramatically changed over what it was 15, 20 years ago. We are not talking about the same products. We're not talking about the same concentrations of nicotine or THC or those types of things. And so this one slide is something that you're able to pull as a PowerPoint slide that's animated from our resource page, and I'll drop in the link to our resources page. But all of our resources are free, and we have a number of one-page infographics and slides like this. And this one, when I talk with adults who are like, well, isn't vaping safer than smoking a traditional combustible cigarette or cigar? And I'll say it's not better or worse, it's just different. And here's a little bit of why. So up until about 2015, we would talk about a 2-pack-a-day smoker being a heavy smoker. So that was kind of the cut point, is you'd say, oh, 2-pack-a-day is a heavy smoker. Well, in 2015, approximately, Juul and some other products came out and hit the market with a lot of flavored, really high-tech flavored products. There were e-cigarettes before 2015, but that's when it really hit the market hard. And it was much more enticing to young people. And when those hit the market, one Juul pod, which is about the size of your thumbnail approximately, would have the equivalent of about 37 cigarettes worth of nicotine in it. And a couple of things. One, that nicotine was a salt-based nicotine. So chemically, it was very different than a combustible cigarette. The salt-based nicotine allowed the nicotine to absorb into your system much faster. So the two things were it absorbed into your system much faster, which meant that nicotine addiction could happen much sooner and much quicker. And the second thing is that that salt-based nicotine decreased the throat hit that someone might have when they smoked a traditional product, whether it was a cigar, whether it was hookah, whether it was a cigarette, whatever it was. If you took your first hit of those devices or those products, frequently you'd cough, would be your first reaction. That may change over time, and if you were using a menthol product, it might not be as harsh. But these salt-based nicotine delivery systems made it so that you didn't have that throat hit, you didn't have that harshness. So not only was it easier and more addictive, but all of those things combined made it so that it was much more appealing. And then you fast forward to last school year and a little bit into this school year, where you're looking at Views and Flume floats and Elf bars and Geek bars and Lost Mary and all of these other products that young people and adults, but primarily young people, are accessing. And when you look at those, and they keep changing names, just to be really clear, the products keep changing names. The content, the delivery mechanism, not changing all that much right now. But to find an Elf bar, that's been outlawed and illegal in a number of places. So they changed the name to a Geek bar or to a Lost Mary. So they'll keep changing it as often as we pass policies and ordinances that say this is not okay. But one Elf bar has the equivalent of about 600 to 700 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So when you talk about nicotine consumption, if you were a 2-pack-a-day smoker, that was 40 cigarettes worth of nicotine. You compare that to somebody who's going through an Elf bar in 7 to 10 days. So even at 10 days, that's still 60 cigarettes worth of nicotine that you're bringing into your body, your heart, your lungs, your bloodstream, all your circulatory system. And that level of nicotine is incredibly addictive. So you're not getting the tar that you get with a combustible product. So if you light something on fire, you inhale it, you get tar, whether it's a cigarette, cigar, cannabis, etc. You'll get that. You don't get that with an e-cigarette, but the other chemicals that you get and the volume of chemicals is substantially more than a traditional combustible cigarette. The other reason that these concern me in part is that with a traditional cigarette or cigar, if you woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go use the restroom, you'd get up, go to the bathroom, go back to bed. With an e-cigarette, because you're not going to light a traditional cigarette on fire because you got to smoke it all the way down. But with an e-cigarette, you can get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, take a hit, and go back to bed. And so the accessibility and the usability is much higher. And again, when I say I talk with adults about this and not young people, is it sounds like a sales pitch when I say to a young person, for $20, you can get 600 cigarettes worth of nicotine, or for $20, you can get 40 cigarettes worth of nicotine. Are you going to take the car that gets 600 miles to the gallon or the one that gets 40? You're going to take the one that gets a higher level of nicotine and more bang for your buck. So that's one of the reasons I only talk about this usually with adults and not students. You can certainly use it with students, but I use it with adults mostly. So that's one of the resources you can pull off our website. The other part that I'm going to share right now that I'll drop some links into the chat, and I don't know why my hand is up right now because my hand is not up in the real world, but it's up on Zoom right now. And at some point, maybe I can figure out how to take my hand down. But as I'm going through the slides, I'll get over it eventually. But what I just dropped into the chat is a link to this one-page flyer that's on the screen, as well as our other trifold brochure that has information about all of the different curriculum that I'm going to share with you as we go through this. I'm also going to drop into the chat right now a link to the QR code that's on the screen. And what that does is it allows you to be part of our listserv. So you'll get our quarterly newsletter. You'll get electronic copies of everything I'm sharing right now. So you'll get copies of all of that electronically. Either scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat. A couple of things I'll point out on this one pager. One, all of our resources are free. So our prevention and intervention curriculums, they're no cost to you to use. The trainings that we offer, there's no charge for any of our trainings. Our data dashboard that's embedded into all of our prevention and intervention resources, there's no cost to use that to do your data collection. So just know that those are all pieces that are all free. We're funded. We're part of the School of Medicine at Stanford. So you have Stanford University and the School of Medicine, and we actually sit in the School of Medicine in the pediatrics department. And we're funded to do research, and we're funded for that work that we do. So the curriculum and all the interventions and prevention work that come out of that, we can provide those for free because that all comes out of our research. So that's a gift that we have that I'm thankful that I get to be part of. The other thing that I mentioned regarding my grandfather and regarding our curriculum is that there's no scare tactics or blame or shame language in any of our content. And that's consistent prevention through interventions. It's all the no blame or shame language. So working kind of top to bottom on this one pager on the screen, towards the top, we're talking primary prevention. You can use it with all 3rd and 4th graders. You could use it with all 6th through 8th graders in middle school. You could use it with all 9th graders and above when I talk about the different levels. So You and Me Together Vape Free, which is on the top left, is our vaping prevention curriculum. And there's a 2-lesson elementary school version that covers kind of nicotine, vaping, e-cigarettes, and the brain and body. And then a second lesson that's similar, talks about some of those refusal skills and some other pieces like that. 2 lessons elementary. Those are available in English and in Spanish. And then there's a 5-lesson middle school and a 5-lesson high school. And I'm trying not to raise my hand on my screen right now because I'm recognizing it's seeing my hand raised, and it's somehow recognizing that and putting that in Zoom as if I'm actually raising my hand. So the 5-lesson middle school, 5-lesson high school. And then on the top right, you have Smart Talk, which is our cannabis prevention curriculum. And again, there's a 2-lesson elementary version for grades 3 and 4, a 5-lesson middle school, and a 5-lesson high school version. For me, when I was in the district and at the County Office of Education, I actually loved training middle school and high school students to be peer educators. And I would train them to use the 2-lesson elementary version of You and Me. And so I trained them up, and then they would go to the feeder elementary schools and teach the 2-lesson elementary version. And then we'd have teachers or community partners who would come into the schools and do the 5-lesson middle school version of You and Me. And then at the high school, we'd either use Smart Talk, which is the prevention curriculum on cannabis, or we'd use Safety First. And Safety First is a much more comprehensive drug education curriculum. It includes opioids and fentanyl, psychedelics, hallucinogens, alcohol, THC, nicotine. So it's much broader in what it covers substance use wise. And it also has very much a harm reduction lens to it. So it talks about naloxone, it talks about recovery position, it talks about Good Samaritan laws, it talks about other things related to kind of those harm reduction strategies, both for themselves as young people, but also their peers, parents, guardians, community members. So how do you use those within your community? So Safety First is more of a comprehensive curriculum. And then Healthy Futures, and I'm going to dive into Healthy Futures a little deeper just to show you kind of how one of our resources is laid out, because then you'll be able to say, oh, I see how that's laid out. Now I know how the other curriculum is also laid out, and I'll show you all of the above. But Healthy Futures is our intervention curriculum. So we also have a Healthy Habits, Healthy Planet curriculum. We've got a What's Menthol Got to Do with It curriculum, and we have a Pride, which is LGBTQI specific curriculum. And again, any and all of those are free. They're all part of the brochure that I dropped into the chat, but they're all available resources, and we do trainings on each of them if those interest you. We also have 2 new video components that we released in end of September, early October. And those are, we've got one for parents, guardians, and we've got one for students. And so I'll drop the links to that in the chat. But the videos that I've dropped in, this first set is really, if you wanted to show it with elementary, middle, high school aged youth, there's some videos that walks through some scenarios that are very real for a young person. And they're animated cartoon type videos that say, little Scotty walked into a party and his friends were offering him something. What are some strategies he might use to be able to participate in the party, but not participate in the substance? Or his best friend just handed him a vape device and says, let's try it. What are some strategies he might use? So there's some videos on that. And then on the next slide, you'll see that we also have some Becoming a Trusted Adult videos, and it's a series of 10 videos. I probably would not push out all 10 to parents, guardians all at once. The way I would use it is I would have, whether it's my PTA, PTSA newsletter or my counselor's newsletter that goes home or my teacher's newsletter that goes home to parents, is I might have a very short 2-sentence description of the video and say, watch this one. Here's 3 questions you might talk to your young person about based on that video. And here's why you use this one, and spread the 10 videos out over 10 weeks or once every 2 weeks and spread it out over 20 weeks. But it's good conversation starters for parents, guardians to be able to work, and community members, because there may be some of you who get asked difficult questions by students and you don't know how to answer them. Like, well, what do you know? You've never smoked weed in your life, or have you ever been drunk, or like those types of things. And in reality, no matter how you answer, the student can flip it on you. So just giving you some ideas in these videos of how you might answer those questions in a way where you can be honest with the student, but also be clear on your message. I will say everything I'm talking about right now really focuses on youth or adolescent use of substances. Nothing that I'm talking about is really about the 30-year-old who has a glass of wine when they get home from work or is using cannabis in whatever the way they're using it. That's not the conversation, and that's not what our curriculum focuses on. So if you do get pushback from parents, guardians, or the community about, well, XYZ is legal, you can say it is legal for adult use. We're really talking about the developing adolescent brain that doesn't have a prefrontal cortex that is fully developed yet. So that's who we're talking about, not you as an adult. If a young person at 14 years old discovers cannabis works for them, because it doesn't work for everybody. If they discover that, they may not learn any other coping strategies to deal with anxiety or depression or how to build healthy relationships. They may stop and their growth in that area, and cannabis may be the way they deal with all mental health issues. So giving them other strategies that we talk about in the curriculum is important. So again, I just mentioned that adult use versus youth engagement is a different conversation. So within all of our curriculum, there's anonymous pre and post surveys that are embedded. I mention anonymous specifically because that means we do not need to have a data sharing agreement with you. So we don't need an MOU, or we don't know little Scotty's survey versus Alyssa's versus Stephanie's. We're not able to differentiate that. So we don't need a data sharing agreement. We already have IRB approval for that. If you don't know what IRB is, awesome. Don't worry about it. If you do know, that means you're probably doing work that involves personal identifiable information in research studies, etc. So I'm sorry, I do know what IRB is. I hope for many of you that's not part of your world because it adds a whole nother layer of headaches to things. But it keeps young people and individuals safe. So pre and post surveys embedded. Usually it's on the second slide of lesson 1 of any of our curriculum, and it's usually the second to last slide of the last lesson. So those pre and post surveys, you get registered on our data dashboard. For me, I've always been somebody that either personally was data driven or I was required by my funder to report out how many students I served, what their data was as far as did we move the needle with them, etc. So I share this with you. The data dashboard is a great way to be able to collect anonymous pre and post survey data. If you register for the data dashboard, which I would absolutely recommend, when you do it, there's really 2 different levels of registration. There's the one on the left that says teacher. Teacher does not mean certificated classroom teacher. It just means educator. It means whoever is providing direct instruction to a young person or an intervention. Alyssa, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering, are the pre and post surveys like a requirement or more of a optional tool, I guess?
It's a great question. They're definitely recommended. They are not a requirement. Certainly recommend them in part because as all of the curriculum is designed and developed and it's evidence-based, it's based on pre and post survey showing effectiveness of the content. And so if you are able to do the pre and the post, you could do it electronically. You could do a paper version, which I'm happy to talk with you how that might work. But if you can do it, it really helps because one of the things we frequently do in education is flavor of the month, where someone comes in super hot and heavy on, I just learned about character counts, or I just learned about whatever this new thing is. And you don't have data to support if what you're doing is actually successful in moving the needle or not. And so it's easier to move off of that onto something else. And for someone who had 14 different superintendents over the last 30 years, every superintendent that I worked with in a school or school district came in with a new leadership mindset and new resources they wanted to use. And so it was really hard if I didn't have data to be able to say, no, we'd like to stick with, we've been using this the last 3 years. We have proof that it moves the needle with our students. We'd like to continue to use this. So collecting that data can be really helpful. So I would encourage it if you want to have a discussion, not you, Alyssa, specifically, but like if anyone wants to talk about it, I'm happy to have a discussion on how to use that data to drive your instruction.
Thank you. And it sounds like you're probably going to get into this, but those pre and post surveys, anonymous, of course, would be able to be accessed by both the teacher/educator and Stanford medicine to use.
Okay. Right. And you could use it at a larger county or district level as well if you wanted to be able to say to a school district board, here's how we use it and why, and here's our data. So there's a site level teacher specific data, and then you could look at it in larger sets that aren't tied to specific students as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. And then when you register, the difference between a teacher and an admin is an admin generally is somebody who, one, has other people reporting to them that you need to see their data as well as your own. So if you are a principal and you're going to be doing the Healthy Futures intervention with students, and you also have 2 health teachers that are teaching You and Me Together vape free in their classroom, you might want to see all of the data for everybody at your site. So you might register as an admin. If you do register as an administrator and you're also going to be teaching any of the content, please make sure that you click on the I'm also a teacher button, because that's the way you get a teacher code. And that teacher code, here's an example. Please do not write down this teacher code. That's mine. If you write it down, all of your student data will go on my dashboard and you will get no access to it. So this is just an example for you to see what it looks like. But the students, when they take the pre or post survey, you give them that code, they enter it, and it says you've joined Scott Gerbert's classroom, or you've joined Alyssa's, or you've joined, if you register if you're with the Boys and Girls Club of XYZ City, you might register and it might say you've joined the Boys and Girls Club. So just know that name is something that you can adjust as to what class they've joined. So I'm going to dive into Healthy Futures as an example. I'm going to show you our other curriculum as well, but Healthy Futures is one that has a number of different components that might be interesting to folks. So Healthy Futures is an intervention. It can be used with students who are found vaping or with nicotine products or cannabis products. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's a ton of data and studies that show the more we do interventions and education versus excluding students from school, the higher their graduation rates are, the higher their attendance rates are, the higher their GPAs are. So keeping them connected to school, and I may be preaching to the choir when I talk to this group, but you really want to educate young people versus sending them away. So if you need any data because your school or school district is like, nope, we have to suspend students when we find them with a vape device, please share this study with them. Reach out to me and say, Scott, can you help me with some language from my school board or my school site to really help them understand that maybe we want to do some interventions. So there's a lot of data. I'm going to jump in right now just very quickly with an example of how I might use this conversation. So I'm going to pretend I'm your social studies teacher. Some of you probably loved social studies. Some of you may not remember anything other than you have to memorize state capitals, presidents, when certain battles or wars were fought, etc. But your social studies knowledge and memory may be limited. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to ask you to drop anything into the chat or unmute yourself. You are welcome to drop answers into the chat because I'm going to ask you a pop quiz right now. You can drop things into the chat if you want. It is not a requirement. I'm not outing anyone's social studies knowledge. All right. Can you give me a thumbs up if you did your kindergarten through 12th grade education in the United States? So if you were K-12 in the US, can you give me a thumbs up? All right. Seeing a bunch of thumbs up. All right. Okay. So that means whether you wanted it or not, you had 13 years of social studies. So somewhere over those 13 years, either a teacher, the principal, counselor, parent, guardian, someone in your life should have dropped knowledge on you in social studies arena. So now I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to have about 10 seconds. Please don't Google it or chat GBT it. Don't look it up. Just accept it for what it is. One question, and that question is, who was the first woman to run for president of the United States, and what year did she run? And I will give you 20 years on either side of your date guess, because numbers can be hard. So if you guess, I'll use 1968 because that was the year in my photo earlier. If you guess 1968, I'll give you to 1988 and back to 1948 as your window for your guess. So 20 years on either side of whatever date you guess. And I want you to think about it in your head and think about a name. And I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to think about it. Trust your gut. In 3, 2, 1. I love the guesses in the chat. So it was Victoria. Victoria ran in 1872. So late 1800s. Well done. So a couple of things. Many people know Frederick Douglass or have heard that name in relation to social studies, way more than Victoria. Frederick Douglass didn't. He was the vice presidential candidate with her on that ticket. He didn't even know he was on the ticket. It was before the internet. He had no way of knowing. She just said, this is who's the second person on my ticket as vice president. But the reality is 1872. So Lisa, you can stay in class. Anyone else within that 40-year window? Generally speaking, it's very few people who get that answer right. The reason I say that out loud is if I were a social studies teacher, I would say, you know what? I need to pause and do some teaching or reteaching. Or I might go to my principal or my school counselors and say, for the master schedule for next year, I'd like to add a section around a topic like this. I would never, as a teacher, think to myself, I'm sending the rest of you, everybody but Lisa, sending everybody else home for 5 days. And then when you come back, I'm going to ask you another social studies question. And if you don't get that one right, I'm going to send you home again. I would never do that as a teacher. And for better or for worse, behaviors, and this has been true since the 80s with the just say no and the zero tolerance policies, a lot of times with behaviors, the immediate response is someone should have told you that. You should know that's not allowed on campus. I'm going to send you home for 5 days to figure it out on your own. So just know that when we're trying to do interventions like Healthy Futures, it's really trying to keep young people engaged and connected and on campus. So Healthy Futures is, as I showed on kind of that one pager, that's our intervention, connects to our prevention resources. And it's really intended for students who are found with a vape device or e-cigarette, other tobacco products, cannabis products. It could be edibles, it could be vapes, it could be hookah, it could be Zyn and nicotine pouches or packets. So it could be any of those products. It can also be used as a cessation light resource. So if you have a student who wants to try and quit or cut back on their use, you could also use it for that. And it's based on motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, stages of change, and trauma-informed restorative practices. So it's really based on that foundation. So again, CBT, motivational interviewing, trauma-informed and restorative practices. So it's based on those components. And there's 4 versions of this. There's up in the top left, you'll see self-paced, and it's called My Healthy Futures. The word my, M-Y, is capitalized, and that's capitalized because my implies I'm doing it on my own. I'm doing it independently. You will do a check-in with that student for 15 to 30 minutes after they complete it, but this is a self-directed, self-paced course. So you've got a nicotine, My Healthy Futures, and a cannabis, My Healthy Futures. On the top right, you have the adult-led, adult-guided that can be done one-on-one or with a small group, and that's called Our Healthy Futures, capital O-U-R. And Our Healthy Futures is that nicotine version or cannabis version, but that's adult-led, adult-guided. So those are just the 4 different current interventions that we have that are free to access. And My Healthy Futures takes a student between 45 to 60 minutes to complete. It is not something where they can push play and go to sleep for an hour and then wake up and be done with the course. I have worked with some that courses that do allow me to do that, which I like if I don't want to learn anything, because then I can just push play and then wake up and take the quiz at the end and hope I get the answers right. This one doesn't work that way. You have to watch the videos that are embedded. You have to answer the questions as you go. And the basic way the course is set up is that you assign the student the course, you give them your teacher code from the dashboard. This is one place, Alyssa, when we talked about pre and post surveys, this is one place where the pre and post are really important, because that's what triggers the student being able to complete the course from beginning to end. It also, if they don't take the post survey, they don't get the certificate of completion at the end of the course, and they're going to want that, and you're going to want that. So you assign the student the course, let them know about that you're going to check in with them, etc. And then the student takes the course self-paced. We do have a 1-page description that's kind of the, and I'll drop a link to that into the chat, but I'll drop in the one for the cannabis curriculum. But this, as you're in it, you would change this and put your school or your district or community partner logo or letterhead at the top. You'd personalize it for your local stuff, put your teacher code in it, etc. But this would walk the student through, here's how I start the course, and here's how I end it. It includes voiceovers, it includes closed captioning, it explains to the student how to change the language on it to be their language of preference, English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, whatever the language is that they're selecting, and how to turn on and off those functions. So I'm going to show you a quick live walkthrough of it. We'll see which screen that pops up on. I may have to move it over. And I will. So again, the student selects, hopefully you're seeing, I'm looking at Alyssa's face just to make sure, seeing the course. They'll select their language. They start course.
Welcome.
I'm going to turn the voiceover off because you don't need to hear me and that. But basically, the student goes in, they're going to enter their name and the teacher code that you gave them. Again, don't use my teacher code. That will not help you. They'll take the pre-survey. They can turn on the closed captioning if they want to see it in another language. You can't see the move to the next slide until you've interacted with the content on that slide. So I can't see the next slide piece. Yeah, and it does look like an old school video game. And the prizes you get up at the top as you're going through it will look the same as old school video games. So the student takes their pre-survey, they come back to the course, they're going to earn swords, diamonds, and stars. Again, old school video game. So they can't see the move to the next slide until they've clicked on the coins to find out what some of those things are. And then they can see the move to the next slide. And the voiceover doesn't just read the content that's on the slide. It actually talks them through and gives them kind of motivational, conversational pieces. Like, as we're in this course together, let's talk about what does it mean to be addicted, and what are the levels on the spectrum that someone might be, and understanding, because all of us are on a continuum of use. Some of the people on this call have never used a substance, cannabis, alcohol, nicotine, etc. And there's some people that are at the higher end that have substance use disorder, and everywhere in between. So the student kind of selects where they are on the spectrum. And then it starts to ask them some motivational interviewing questions that they answer that come out in a workbook at the end of the course. So that's what you would review with them at the end of the course is once they've filled in their answers, that'll come out as a PDF at the end that you'd be able to discuss with them. So how they answer those questions. What are some of your triggers? What are some of the challenges you've got? What are some of the opportunities that you have? So a student takes the course. When they're done with the course, they get a certificate of completion. That certificate also gets emailed to you as the person whose teacher code they used. You'll get it emailed to you automatically. So right away, when Scotty hits submit, you'll get an email that says, thank you. Scotty Gerbert has just completed My Healthy Futures. Here's a copy of his certificate of completion. So you'll get an electronic copy of that. And it'll come automatically to you. But the student can also enter if they have other people that they need that certificate to go to. If they need it to go to the assistant principal, or they need it to go to their counselor, or they need it to go to their parent guardian, they can enter that email address as well. The other piece that I'll point out on this slide is that I definitely encourage people to talk with young people about the symptoms of withdrawal. And the reason I mention that now is that with this course specifically is a lot of times, and any of you who have ever had addiction that has been part of your life, the average smoker, it takes them 11 attempts before they're successful in quitting smoking tobacco products. It's incredibly addictive. A young person who at 14 or 15 years old stop using their nicotine for 12 hours, they might get irritable. They might get a headache. They might get tired. Their body may ache. And what they're going to equate that to is, see, the nicotine network cannabis is helping me. That's relieving my pain. If they don't know, that's a normal withdrawal symptom. You need to give it 72 hours. You need to give it 5 days for that to work out of your system. So talking with them about withdrawal symptoms is going to be really important if they're going to make any attempt to reduce or quit. So I mention that just because sometimes in this education setting, in the public health setting, we don't mention that. And then someone starts going through withdrawal symptoms. And if you're 15 years old and your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, even as an adult, I might go, this is horrible. I don't like the way I feel at all. I'm super angry with everybody. I cannot pay attention to anything. The cannabis was what was helping me. That's what they're going to revert back to. So just knowing how to talk about withdrawal with the students can be really helpful. So from a practical standpoint, I used My Healthy Futures as my first intervention with students, which is the self-paced version. And about 70% of the time, I did not see the students back in my office again. So 70% success rate with that, and them not having that same issue on campus. The 30% that came back, I used either brief intervention or teen intervene with them. Those are not Stanford related resources, but those are just different evidence-based intervention curriculum. And I'm happy to share those with folks if that's something you want to talk about at some point, but that's the next level. And then I would use Our Healthy Futures as my third intervention for that 5% that were my high flyers that came back. And I would do it in small groups of no more than 8 students. And I would also do it one-on-one or 2 or 3-on-1, depending upon the number of people that I had at any given time. So before I go into Our Healthy Futures, any questions about My Healthy Futures, the self-paced version?
Is that something usually that, sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but this
That's
creature
okay.
this creature has entered the webinar. I'm wondering, do you usually have students do that like during school time and sort of like an in-school suspend, or like, do you have them do that at home? Do you have any recommendations on what works best around that?
So it really depends on your school setting and your process. I mean, my preference is, and I'll use the terminology used because a lot of schools will call it an in-school suspension, an ISS, versus an out-of-school suspension, OSS. A lot of times, if it's nicotine specifically, I would have them do it right there on site in the counselor's office, in the library, whatever, in a space, though, that they can hear the voiceover, not just read the slides. So wherever the setting is, I would certainly make it so that whether they have headphones on or can be in a room where they can be alone, having them listen to the voiceover. But I would do it right then with the students. If it's nicotine, if it's cannabis, it's a different conversation. Because if they're high at that moment, they're not going to retain the information. So that's a slightly different conversation. But my preference would be do something on campus for nicotine so that the student knows you're trying to educate versus go home and learn something and then come back. But I would certainly do that reentry conversation with the student and have a 15 to 30-minute check-in with them that's like, we want you on campus. We want you here. We want you with your friends. We want you to learn. We want you to engage. We want you to know that you're valued on campus. We can't have that behavior on campus. So what can we do to support you to make sure that you're here, that you're connected, that you feel like you belong here, and that your vaping doesn't belong on campus? So it's a great question. So the version that's the adult-led, adult-guided version, Our Healthy Futures, there's a 2-hour and a 4-hour version of that. It's not a 2-hour straight or 4 hours straight where you're doing 4 hours with the student in your office doing the whole curriculum at once. Breaking it into chunks is absolutely what should be done. Could be 4 1-hour sessions Tuesday after school. It could be something that you do broken up into lunch periods or slightly longer periods than that. But the biggest difference between the 2-hour and the 4-hour versions is how much processing time you give the students and how much self-reflection in the workbook. In the course that we did online, My Healthy Futures, the workbook is embedded in the course electronically. For the adult-led, adult-guided version, there's a printed workbook that the students are going to fill out while they're working with you. So giving them more time to reflect. So when they come back the next week, you can say, one of the goals you set was instead of getting high before school because you're super anxious, you were going to go check in with your choir teacher or your basketball coach or whoever that trusted adult is before school. How did that go? Oh, you were only able to find, Mr. Gerbert on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. How did it go on the other days? So like really asking them those motivational interviewing questions and engaging them. There is an adult guide, so a facilitator guide, how to use the course. And this student workbook, there's not a lot of printed materials that you have to use with any of our content. There are some things that you might want to print out. This is one that you would definitely want to print out. It's a Google Doc, it's PDF that you'd print out. It's a 2-page or 2-sided, 1-page document. Ask the same questions as in the online course. But the thing that I will share with this, 2 lessons learned. Lesson 1, these belong to the students. They're journaling and filling these out on their own. But between sessions, if you're doing 4 sessions with them, keep the workbook in your room or your classroom or your counseling office. Then give it back to them when they come in for session 2. Do not send them home with the students. If you send them home, they will never come back. So that was a lesson I learned the hard way, is I sent first time, super naive, sent them home with the students thinking they're engaged in this course. And then none of them brought them back to session 2. So that was the first thing. Second thing is it looks like it should be very simple to fold into a really cute postcard size handout that the students interact with. It's not a big 8.5 by 11. You fold it into a postcard size. I've made origami and I've made cootie catchers out of it, but I've never been able to fold it correctly into the postcard size. So one of my students, thankfully, created a video, which is on our website, that shows you how to cut it and fold it into a really cute postcard size. I will show you where that is, but just know that you can do it without watching the video if you want. I don't recommend that, but you can do it if you want. You can try it. So just a really quick live walkthrough. And the reason I'm walking you through this one live, in part, is because all of our curriculum, whether it's our You and Me Together Vape Free, our Smart Talk Cannabis curriculum, our Safety First curriculum, our Pride curriculum, all have a similar layout and way that you access the resources. So when you go to the Healthy Futures page or the You and Me Together Vape Free page, as you scroll down, you'll see the content. Here, this is showing the nicotine Healthy Futures and the cannabis Healthy Futures. I'm going to jump into the nicotine version. So the way the websites are set up is it's got sample letters to parents for all of our curriculum. So if you're wanting to tell parent, guardian about, we're going to use Stanford's You and Me Together Vape Free curriculum, it gives you language that you can pull from about Stanford's Reach Lab, about that it's evidence-based curriculum, about why you're using it. So that language is there. You can choose to use it. You can choose not to. It's not a requirement of the course or of our resources, but it's available to you there. So there's that for parents. There's some information on how to use Canva, because all of our curriculum is in Canva, which is sort of like PowerPoint or Google Slides, but amped up to another level, a little more animated, a little more graphic. And then availability in English and Spanish to be able to access most of our resources. That should be fairly obvious on each website. So with the program with Healthy Futures, even though I talked about My Healthy Futures, I do want to show you that if I click on My Healthy Futures and scroll down the page, I can see the piece here where it says to review the sample student instructions, and there's a link there to pull up the Google Doc that you might make a copy of. This is the nicotine version, and this is the Google Doc that explains how the student would access those resources. I'll share that in the chat as well, because I shared the cannabis one earlier. That's the nicotine version. But then I will also share, so I'm going to go back now from My Healthy Futures to Our Healthy Futures, which is more like all of the rest of our curriculum, being adult-led, adult-guided. As you go down, you can see the English and Spanish. I'll click on the 4-hour version to show you that. A couple of things. Above almost all of our curriculum, or right below it, are the handouts, if there's any that you need to go with the course. Cost calculator, the handbook that I talked about, that's that PDF document. Here's the video. I'm so thankful that it's there. But even just looking at the image on the screen, when it pops up, like I can see, oh, they make one cut right here, and that makes it so they can fold it neatly into 4 quadrants. I can't do it without watching the video. It's 30 seconds. It'll save you hours of frustration. But with the course, with all of our courses, when you're on the page, you can do 2 things here. One, you can click right through all of our slides. So if you want to look at the slide deck to see what the course actually looks like, you can click through it on the screen. So with any and all of those, you can click through it and say, all right, here's what it all looks like. When you are ready to own it, to make it your own, up here at the top, there's either a green or teal or gray bar. And if you click on that, it will then pop up a window that says, this is our template. I want to edit the template, and that'll make a copy onto your Canva account of our slide deck with all the teacher notes and everything else that's associated with it. So if you click on Edit Template, it's going to make a copy of our Healthy Futures curriculum or our You and Me Together Vape Free curriculum, whatever curriculum you're working with. That edit template is going to make it so you can edit it. And I absolutely recommend that because a couple of things. One is this front screen, I'll make it a little tinier. This front screen is very Stanford focused. Add a slide before this one that has Maine Health, that has your district logo on it, your school logo on it. Personalize this that has your name on it, whatever you want to put on that opening slide. As long as you don't add scare tactics or blame or shame language, feel free to add content to the slide before this. Also would say that on this slide, once you have a teacher code, above this, add a line of text with your teacher code on it. So you don't have to write it on the dry erase board or somewhere else for the student. Add it to that slide so it's right there on the screen for the students. And then greetings and check-ins. And in the school that I work in, or the schools I work in, we call them community agreements. That may not be what you call them, not what's posted on the wall in the classroom or somewhere else. It could be norms and expectations. It could be whatever you call that in your community. And so that you're really talking about what we talk about here stays here. What, we take turns talking, whatever those things are. So if community agreements isn't the language you use, don't feel like you have to leave that as community agreements. Call them what you call them locally. And then towards the end of the curriculum, whether it's our prevention or intervention curriculum, if it's got slides like this that say resources, we have national resources like the Truth Initiative is in there, like teensmokefree.gov. But you're in Maine. Kick It California doesn't work for your students. But if there is a local resource or a state resource that Maine Health or someone else has that's another resource, tweak this slide. If you like the image that's on here, but you want to change the text, do it. Keep that image. It's appealing for young people. For this, change the text to have your local information about community-based partner, mental health service organization, other prevention or intervention resource. Feel free to add that there. So again, with all of our curriculum, I'm just going to show you some examples, but this You and Me Together Vape Free, which is our vaping prevention curriculum, if I click into that, it keeps opening on this other screen. When I click into that, I'll scroll down. I can see the elementary, middle, and high school versions of that curriculum. I can then click on the middle school version and say, okay, here's the 5 lessons. I'm going to do lesson 1. When I click on that, as I scroll down, I can see that green bar when I'm ready to make a copy of it onto my own Canva account. And here I can walk right through all of the slides again, where I'm, the community agreements again. That's not what we use in our community. I'm going to tweak that one. I'm going to add onto here a slide before it that this is our tobacco nicotine prevention curriculum for Maine Health or whoever it is. So, and then you'll see the teacher talking points or the lesson plan. We do have parent guardian conversation starters. So where it says lesson 1, middle school discussion guides, that's a discussion guide that you could send home to parents, guardians to be able to say, here's what your young person learned in school today. Here's some ways to start a conversation with them. Regan, did you have a question?
Scott, could you just add the link to the in the chat to those discussion guides? That would be helpful.
Yeah, so I'll do 2 things. So one, I'll do one for the middle school curriculum just to be able to show that lesson 1. I'll drop that into the chat, and then I'll drop into the chat. Let me go back one. Because this link requires you to make a copy of it onto your own. I'll open it up so you can see it. But that link takes that document, because we had some issues with people putting their teacher codes in and rearranging the slides. But what it does then is it's like, what are some things that could happen? So it has a story that they can talk about with their parent guardian and work through a conversation. So those are available on each of the lessons. Good, that's a great question. Thank you for that. And then with almost all of our content, there's a Kahoot available. In some places, Kahoots work great. In some places, they don't work at all and we don't use them. If you don't have the Wi-Fi access, if the students aren't allowed to use their phone on campus, if it takes 10 minutes to log into Kahoot, that may not be a great use of 10 minutes of instructional time. But if Kahoot is something you're using at your site all the time, and the students are really used to it and they can jump in quickly, it's worth it to play the Kahoot just as a check for understanding question within the lesson. All right, so there was a lot of content that I covered over the last 50 plus minutes. Questions that folks have or other things you might want to see as you're looking into our resources. And again, I'm going to drop into the chat my contact information as well as how to get onto our listserv. And I'll also drop into the chat the one pager, either both the trifold and the one pager that explains all of the different prevention and intervention curriculum we have. All right, I'm going to stop my screen share so you're all going to see each other's faces again. I always warn people before I do that. Now my hand's raised again. So I'm going to stop my screen share and lower my hand. There we go.
Great, Scott. Thank you so much for that. And I too, I jotted down all the links just because I'm not exactly sure in terms of the recording, whether those links also live with the recording. I think they probably do, but I did copy and paste all those links and plan to share them in an email and follow up to those that are here, as well as some other folks who couldn't join us, but really wanted to get the content of this webinar today. So we really appreciate all of those resources. Before, yeah, Alyssa, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, like, I think we had some staff on here that probably do more of like the universal curriculum in classes. And I'm wondering what you think the best way for them to sort of digest and practice some of this content is. Like, do you recommend that they kind of just familiarize themselves with it and then start using the resources available to start presenting it to their classrooms? Do you recommend them, you know, like if it was You and Me Together Vape Free, doing that with like each class once a week? Or, you know, I guess I'm just kind of wondering like what your guidance around some of that stuff might be for those that might be doing more universal and less like maybe working with the students that have been caught using a substance.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you asking it that way. And the only reason I showed Healthy Futures that way is because from knowing how to view the lesson and then download it, it's the same with all of our content. That's the only one that has a self-paced version also. So I showed that one because there's the self-paced. And to explain the self-paced after I show the You and Me Together Vape Free or Smart Talk, sometimes people get confused and they're like, so is this self-paced or adult-led, adult-guided? Only my Healthy Futures is self-paced. Everything else is adult-led, adult-guided. But if you're going to be implementing something like You and Me Together Vape Free, the vaping prevention curriculum, or Smart Talk, or Safety First, I would certainly review the slides and the teacher guide that has a picture of the slide and then the teacher talking points right next to it. I would review that. I would certainly encourage consistency of delivery. So if your plan is, I'm going to do the 5 lessons Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week, awesome. If you're going to say Thursday is my prevention day, I'm going to do it for 5 weeks, 1 lesson per week for 5 weeks. The consistency piece is important for the students and for you probably, but for the students, so they know what to expect. Sometimes I get the challenge where a PE teacher is using this as a rainy day activity or something else. And it's like, all right, well, let's go back and talk about, we're on lesson 2 now. I know we did lesson 1 when we had that freak thunderstorm in September, but now it's November and we're going to do lesson 2. How many of you remember when we talked about nicotine in your brain? No. And honestly, and I can't remember if you're still recording, but you are, which is fine. But when we talk about prefrontal cortex of a young person, I don't know how many of you, and I'm not going to ask you to out yourself in the conversation, but when your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, it is a gift that we don't necessarily appreciate all the time, but it's a gift in that a 14-year-old can break up with their partner and be heartbroken for 72 hours and then be with somebody new, and it's the best relationship they've ever had. If you're 40 years old and you break up with your partner, it could be 72 months before you're willing to start dating or trusting again. And in part, that's because your prefrontal cortex is fully developed and you know, and your brain goes, that might hurt. Do I trust? How am I going to build this relationship? Where do I even start in dating? Like your brain starts to process way more than a 14-year-old does, who's like, oh, that person's cute. We're going to date. Like that's as far as it goes. And so if you can be consistent on the instructional side of things, it's helpful because unless they know to expect this, every Thursday I'm going to be in here, we're going to talk about nicotine and its impact on your brain, your body, the environment, how you're being targeted as a young person, and kind of mental health. Unless they know to expect that, then they will have lost it because they'll think this is a one-time thing that Lisa's bringing into my room. I don't need to pay attention to it again because we didn't get quizzed on it and I don't need to know it. And then 2 months later, you pop in and Lisa knows it was the late 1800s when our first female ran for president of the US, which is awesome. But a lot of the students will be like, that person looks familiar. Did she come in and talk to me before? Like that's as close as they're going to get to the content. So consistency is what I would certainly recommend.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that question, Alyssa. That was great. And again, does anyone have any questions? All right, I will just share my slides one last time here. So thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Scott, for this great content that you provided today. We will follow up with the links that were shared in the chat, as well as more information and the recording itself. So for those that might want to go back in and listen, or for those that might want to share with some of their colleagues, that will be available. This is just a reminder of our next sessions as part of this professional development series. I think Alyssa's going to go ahead and drop in the chat the flyer. So we encourage you to register. Our next session will be joined by the Maine Department of Education, Stacy Barlow, talking specifically around restorative practices. We talked a little bit about that today, but Stacy's going to dive deep and talk a little bit about the work that she's been doing statewide with her team on creating a culture of care and working to engage in restorative practices in schools across Maine. And then we will be joined in December by our Healthy Eating Active Living team that's going to talk to us a little bit about strategies that support healthy eating and active living, and building America's healthiest schools, and a little bit about their recognition program, a national recognition program. So please do share the flyer throughout your school and with your school community. It is open to everyone. This is a free opportunity for everyone. And we encourage you to register early, and we will send communication along as well. And then with that, you can see our contact information here. I think I speak on behalf of our entire tobacco prevention team, and thanking you all for taking the time to be with us here on this Tuesday afternoon. And again, Scott, thank you so much for your expertise and knowledge and the resources that are available for free at Stanford's as part of Stanford's Reach Lab. So with that, I will also stop sharing. And